is nothing.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm quite happy to be here because in Finland I have spent 6 months of my life studying as an Erasmus student, and I had a great time, experienced a lot of adventure, and made a lot of friends. And it's first time since then I'm here back to Finland. And when I finished my Erasmus program here, I returned it back to Czech Republic, and I have set it up or co-founded a company called Patron IT. You know, I've always been passionate about computers since my childhood, so I knew that I want to do it. And we started to protect companies. We started strictly or directly from cybersecurity. And like over the weekends, I'm studying the offensive side, and during the weekdays, we are trying to protect our customers. I think that to protect the customers like efficiently, it's important to know how the attackers are behaving, because then we can target the right remediations and do the right defense. As an MSP and MSSP company, we need to use some tools for our work, because we need to take care about more than 100 customers. And that's why we need some single pane of glass, how to look on multi-tenant environments. And so we were looking for some tool to use for reporting and alerting of Entra ID environments, because right now, all of our customers, they have Entra ID. And we have chosen AdminDroid. It's not a product talk, and you will see why shortly. But we have chosen it because we care about security, and I wanted some tool which will be self-hosted on our environment. And AdminDroid says on the website, like, we never ask you for the admin password, neither do we store your data. And I said, OK, that's what we want, because we will be putting all our customer access to that tool, and we want to like secure it as much as it's possible. And as well, they say, like, we are a trustworthy company because we have big brands, and as well, we like report or monitor more than 30,000 tenants and 60 million of users. So I said, OK, fine, let's start with that. And I have another rule, and that rule is like, when we use some tool, we should validate the tool. We should validate if it behaves like it should behave, to know its strengths and weaknesses. So I dig deeper into the AdminDroid, and I realized that I was shocked from something. You know, so they say they don't store the passwords, neither the data, but what they do is that each hour, they send global admin refresh tokens to their servers from all around the world, from all the companies they are monitoring. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that, you know. So I reached to the developers, and they said, oh, that's a feature, it's not a bug. So there are some conclusions for me from that, like never trust anyone. And, you know, actually, in the previous slides, they were not lying. They are not asking for the admin password, neither they store the data. They just have access anytime they want to all of the data. And because the refresh token is a global admin refresh token, they can do whatever they want in those tenants. But they don't disclose it. And that's a fall, by my opinion. And if you have seen yesterday's presentation of Nestory, you know that the refresh tokens of global admins, in that case, are similar sensitivity like the password to the global admin. And as well, like if this company receives each hour like keys to 30,000 of tenants, it looks like a good target for some supply chain attacks. Because if you will breach the company, you will be able to breach another 30,000 companies. But that wouldn't be something new, because we have seen big supply chain attacks with SolarWinds, for example. And the title of my talk just promised you that we will be speaking about supply chain attacks on global scale. So we need to put some more steroids into it. But before I will start, I would like to lay down some building blocks so that we share the same context. So Entra ID, why should we bother about Entra ID? Because it's a tier 0 technology. It's a crown jewel in a matter of defense and the attack. Because if someone breaches Entra ID tenant, he controls the whole company network, the whole infrastructure. And then it's cloud accessible. You know, it's very different from the Active Directory on-premise, because if you wanted to breach Active Directory, it's isolated from internet by some firewall and NAT. So you need to compromise some computer inside the network first, or some credentials which will allow you to connect to the VPN, and then you can target the Active Directory. But with Entra ID, as it's global cloud technology, everyone from all around the world can target any company all around the world. And then the market penetration of the technology. Like, almost all of us have some Entra ID tenant, because even if we don't realize it, if we have Teams, we have Entra ID. If we have Exchange Online, we have Entra ID. And right now, with sunsetting of Exchange on-premise, like, more and more companies will have Entra ID. And then it's a very complex technology, which is evolving rapidly. And there is a higher chance of misconfiguration. So all of this is a recipe for interesting target for the attackers in the future. And another thing is that for the last 8 years, we've been dealing with incident response during the ransomware attacks. And I just needed a couple of months to realize that there is some pattern in those attacks. And the pattern is that the attackers are very good in lateral movement phase. They know Active Directory better than the defenders. The defenders, mostly, they are still trying to build security around the perimeter and buying another services and another hardware. But once the attackers, they are inside the network, they are able to escalate from domain user to domain administrator in a matter of hours. And I believe that if we will put those two slides together, so the attackers, they know Active Directory better than the defenders. But Entra ID is similar, like Active Directory. It's the same complexity, but it's much more recent. Active Directory has been here in the, not changed much since 2008. So it's been 17 years. And still, there is a lot of defenders who don't know it well. But what about Entra ID, which is quite much more recent, and it's changing rapidly? The gap between the knowledge necessary to maintain it or configure it correctly is much wider. And almost everybody has Entra ID. Most of the companies, they have both technologies right now, so it's like a double attack surface. So, by my opinion, it's a time-ticking bomb right now. And I think that in a couple of years, we will see a new wave of attacks, which will be like ransomware attacks, but they will be targeting Entra ID. Why don't we have them right now? I think it's because of the monetization model. The attackers, like the regular cyber criminals, they are doing the attacks mostly for financial profit. And they need to find out how to make money on breaching the Entra ID. On-premise, it's ransomware. They encrypt the data or exfiltrate the data, and then they ransom the companies. With APT groups, they already know how to make money, or they don't make money, but they know why to breach Entra ID environments, and that's for the espionage, as you will see some examples later. So let's back to the topic. Let's make some supply chains on a global scale. For that, why Entra ID allows some scenario like this? It's the interconnectivity. You know, with cloud, they came the idea about cooperation. Let's cooperate together. And the companies, they started to cooperate. There are such relationships between companies that it's like a matrix, and every company is someone's customer and someone's supplier. Then it's the cloud-based nature of Entra ID. As I said, everyone can attack any company directly from all around the world. And the good thing is, for the attackers, that they don't need to bypass any EDR, antivirus, endpoint solutions. Because if you are attacking Entra ID, there are no endpoints in your way. You are just directly attacking the service. Of course, there can be some security technologies in Entra ID, but they are not so widespread right now as they should be. And then it's the standardized environment at Entra ID. You know, everyone's tenant is similar or same, and there is unified API. in the big days of on-premise, if someone would breach company like we are and realizes that he breached MSP company, so he can access all of their customers and encrypt them. It's much better because you don't need to breach 100 customers or companies. You just breach one company, and through that you will attack all of the customers. But what happened is that many times the attackers, they didn't realize what they got. So they missed the chance to attack the customers of that victim. But because you need to find out the password management software which the MSP is using. Find out how to get inside that password management software, how to exfiltrate the passwords, how to access the environments of the clients if you need some VPN, if the VPN is different to each customer and so on. But with Entra ID, the things are more unified and they allow a bigger, or easier supply chain attacks. So the only missing thing is how to bypass security or trust boundary. In Active Directory, forest is a trust boundary. In Entra ID, it's tenant. So we need to find out how we can move from one tenant to another tenant. So if we breach one tenant, how to attack other tenants, and if there are such things. And there are. So let's start with the first one. It's multi-tenant applications. It's if you will look into the GUI of Entra ID, you will find out that those are just two options there. So it looks quite easy, but the opposite is true. It's very complex. It's so complex stuff, and it's new stuff. So there is a lot of mistakes being made right now. With the application, there are two terms. One is application registration, and another one is enterprise application. Application registration is like a template which contains metadata and some credentials. And it sits in a developer's tenant. And then each company which uses this application has enterprise application in their tenant, which is more, you can pretend it more like a user account for that application. So if the application is doing anything in the tenant, it's doing in the name of that enterprise application, in that name of that user. And application, they can have some permissions or privileges. And what we are interested mostly are permissions which are assigned directly to that application, so that the application can act with those permissions on its own directly. And then we need to know how to log in as the application, how to impersonate the application. And for that, we need a certificate with a private key, or we need to create a client secret, which is just a secret string. And each application can have several credentials, several methods how to sign in. And with that, so how to misuse those applications. So if it's a post-breach activity, so if we will breach a tenant, we are looking if that tenant is a developer of some application. If yes, we are looking what are the privileges of that application. We add a new secret to that application, so we are able to impersonate the application, find tenants trusting that application or using that application, and then we just log in to the target tenant as that application. There are some nice perks of using or misusing application. And one of them is there is no MFA for that application. So if you will create a secret string for that application, it's enough. There is no MFA. The defenders, we as the defenders, we are trying to push MFA to everywhere so that the users are using MFA and the users are using phishing-resistant logging authentication mechanisms. But with that, with applications, it's just a secret string. And as well, for the applications, there is no conditional access policies being applied. So if you have, for example, conditional access policies which require compliant device, hybrid join device, or some trusted IP, it doesn't apply for application. There is a conditional access policies for applications, but it's called conditional access policies for workloads, and it's an add-on, so you have to pay extra to Microsoft for that. And as well, it will allow you only to restrict the logon of the application to some trusted IPs. Otherwise, even if your application is logging through Germany normally and next day is logging through Russia, it will not raise any suspicions if you don't have Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps or something like that. So why are those applications so challenging? Because it's a mesh. It's No, I don't know the word. So they serve multiple purposes. Sometimes they are used for single sign-on, sometimes for access delegation, sometimes they are used as a client application governments. And then there is the confusing terminology, because in API world, they are called application and service principal. In GUI, it's called application registrations and enterprise applications. And if you would like to see some details about the application in GUI, it's limited. Through API, you will get much more information. And then you can assign the permissions to the applications by several ways. And as well, the default configuration of tenant is insecure. Every user can consent new applications. Every user can register new application. And if you will create a brand new Entra ID tenant, already there will be hundreds of applications. And in a tenant which lives for a couple of years, you will see more than 1,000 of applications. So maybe you can be thinking, OK, so that's the theory. But what's the reality? Is it a real issue? And is it so complex? And is someone misusing it? And yeah, it's a good question. And the answer is yes, because we have a beautiful example of the issue with Microsoft, which was breached through multi-tenant enterprise applications last year, January. And what happened? So one APT group was doing password spray against some legacy test Microsoft tenant. And because it was legacy tenant, test tenant, they succeeded with the password spray. So the password was something very simple. And normally, MFA would stop them. But it was a legacy test tenant, So there were no MFA. But who cares about legacy test tenant? Actually, there was some application registered in the tenant. And what happened? That registration, or that enterprise application was trusted by a production tenant of Microsoft. So the attackers were able to, and had a higher privileges. So the attackers were able to compromise the production tenant of Microsoft and access the emails of Microsoft employees and management and all of the guys. We could say, hey, look, we have some tiering model, right? This is like an example of tiering model failure, because the more secure environment is trusting something from less secure environment. And then the other thing is like, look, Microsoft is the one who implemented this technology. And they have limitless security budget for that. But still, they screw up. They were exploited or compromised through that. So this is how the things are complex. I believe right now it's fixed in Microsoft. And they probably did some, they improved the security, so it will not happen again. But what about us? What about the rest of the world? How we are standing with those applications? And then there is another functionality which crosses the trust boundary and security boundary of the tenant. And those are guest accounts. Everybody knows them because we need to cooperate together. And we are usually invited to someone else's tenant. So then it means that one user has access to several tenants. So you see, it's spread across multiple tenants, so it's like breaching the security boundary. But it's normal functionality. It's for B2B collaboration, multi-tenant organizations. And it's a good functionality because otherwise, in the old offline on-premise days, we would create separate account for those people, and they would need to manage several pairs of credentials for everything. And it has some other advantages. But what's adding up to these external guest accounts is that many times they are privileged in the target tenant, because you hire an externist to help you to set up some configuration or some functionality, or to help you manage something. So they have privileges. They are not just regular guest accounts without any permissions. Or maybe some admins, they need to manage multiple tenants. So they are global admins in multiple tenants with just one account. And how to misuse it? We are just looking for users with access to other tenants. Then we add a temporary access password to those users. We impersonate the users and access the target tenant. There is, again, one tip, and it's if you have a user from tenant A who has access to tenant B, and the user is accessing tenant B, only the conditional access policies from tenant B are being applied, not the conditional access policies from tenant A. So, for example, if you have a privileged user, which is like secured by some conditional access policies that it can log in only from some trusted IP, but he has access to other tenants, no, the conditional access doesn't apply to him. Only the conditional access policies in those like remote tenants. And then we can like benefit from that access. And the last technology, which can be like misused, is GDAP. The thing is that GDAP is not well known because only Microsoft partners, CSP partners, they have access to it. It's a technology which allows us to manage our customers without needing to create the guest accounts in those tenants. On the video, you can see that this is how it works. We just select in the partner relationship, partner portal, that we want to access some of our customers and which portal we want to access, and we are just inside of it. And as well, the user which appears to that is not existing in the tenant, so there is some object ID from the original tenant. The GDAP works like that we send invitation or we send a request to a customer and we say, look, we would like to help you manage your environment and we would like to have roles like global admin or user admin or help desk administrator. And the customer just accepts it. And when he accepts it, me as an administrator of the partner, I can select which of my colleagues can access that customer. But now, what I told you, you probably know more than the people who are using the GDAP. Because from audits which we do at our customers or clients, we see that even big companies, they don't know how to use it or they were not thinking correctly about it. For example, this is GDAP for one of our customers, and it's GDAP relationship from T-Mobile. T-Mobile is a mobile operator in Czech Republic. And they are selling licenses to customers. And from how they set it up, I can say that they are not aware what they are doing. For example, they assign it multiple roles through the GDAP, but some of the roles, they are redundant because they are included in other roles they selected. The other thing is that with the roles they have selected with privileged authentication administrator and user administrator, which is there, you can create new global admins. So effectively, they are global administrators for that customer. And the other thing is that they assign it the rights to a group in their tenant, which is called admin agents. And admin agents is a legacy group from the prior days when GDAP was just a DEP, which was delegated administrator privileges. And always it was a global administrator. Then Microsoft said, OK, we need to change it. So they added the G, which is granular, that you can select the roles which you can use. And if T-Mobile has used the generic group name, which is legacy one, I can assume that they just copied it one-to-one to the new GDAP system. And as well, what it means, like, it's a national operator. So they have thousands of clients, maybe tens of thousands, I don't know. And the group is not named like admins for Prague city or admins for Moravia. No, it's admin agents. So it means that probably they are having the same technicians have access to all of their customers. You know, they are not trying to separate it to use something like least privilege or something. And how many technicians is there? I don't know, neither the customer knows. Maybe 10, maybe 20. It's like sometimes when you do audit and you look into the domain administrator and you don't know the users which are there. And OK, and then it's not just the users which are in that group, but all the global admins of that T-Mobile tenant or some group administrators, they can add new members to there. And if some of that technicians is breached, he's technically global administrator to all of their customers. So if T-Mobile will be breached and the attackers will be like smart, they will breach all the customers at all. And the other thing is that many times the T-Mobile, they don't have any service agreement with the, they don't have, like, the customers, they are just buying licenses. They don't want them to manage their service, but no one cares. They are just offering the GDAP, and customers are accepting the GDAP. It's like a meaningless risk, which both of the sides are accepting. And it's not just T-Mobile, because the row below, you can see AT Computers, which is a MSP company like National One in Czech Republic. And then the other one, it's TD Synnex, which is a Czech company which is part of the international company of hardware and licensed resellers. And they have the same mess. They try to do something a little bit more, but they take global administrator and then they add another 12 rows. Why so? No one knows. I told them once, and nothing changed. OK, so to misuse the GDAP, we just need to read out what are the GDAP relationship, pick one user which has access to some other customers, add a temporary access password so we can impersonate him, and once we impersonate him, we can access the tenants. And there is another nice functionality with the GDAP, and it's like that if the target tenant requires MFA, it will be fulfilled, because by default, GDAP trusts MFA from the home tenant, and TAP, temporary access password, is MFA. It's a single and second factor authentication. So if we sign in as that user, we are in the target tenant, and no other MFA is being requested. And then we can benefit from it. And as well, this has been misused, and it's few years already. In 21, there has been like one APT group which was misusing it, and they were hacking MSP partners, and through that MSP partners, they were going after their customers. So 21, so it's like almost 4 years, but we can see that there hasn't changed much. OK, and the thing is that if we combine all those techniques or relationships together, we can see that with the metrics and the trust between the companies, we can see that as someone is someone's supplier and someone customer, you start somewhere, and you can move laterally between all those tenants. Which, if we will reorganize it, so at the beginning, there is a first breach. There is a breach of the tenant. Imagine that someone will breach the admin droid. So they will have access to 30,000 of tenants with global admin permissions. And what they will do, they will go to the single tenant and do the reconnaissance and exploitation again. So it will be like an avalanche going down. Now we are getting to the supply chain on global scale. And how difficult is to implement it? No, it's not difficult, because that unification through the API, and that everything is accessible because it's a cloud service. So you can directly attack the tenants, all of them, from all around the world. And not to have it just as a theory, I wanted to do some POC, so I've created one. Here is a pseudocode. So it's quite simple. You just push the first compromised tenant to the stack, and then you do reconnaissance, exploitation. And if the exploitation is successful, you just add the tenant to the stack, and you repeat it. So I wanted to do the code a little bit modular, so it can be upgraded and new functionality can be added. So with the reconnaissance, I have that all of those three possibilities, GDAP, enterprise apps, and guests. For pivoting, I have implemented the temporary access password and application secrets. Then if you breach the tenant, you need some type of backdoor or persistence. So I'm using malicious application, which is added to the tenant as persistent. And over here is the demo. Oh, yeah. So here is the code. And the code just needs at the beginning to provide the backdoor application, and initial compromised account. Doesn't matter if it's too small, because I will share the code with you. And to run it, we will just open the PowerShell to run in separate window. And I have implemented small GUI so that we can see the stack of the tenants. I have used the Nestoris library, AAD internals for token management. And when it's run, you can see that it realizes that the initial tenant is fully compromised, so it backdoored him and started to scanning for the relationships in that tenant. And we can see that it detected 5 relationships of guests and 3 relationships of applications, and it detected that the relationships leads to 3 tenants. So they were added to the stack so that we know about them. And it immediately realized that we can access one tenant, the MHLab dev, with a user Lydia, which is guest there but has application developer rights and directory readers. Then it's trying to use some other guest relationships, but sometimes it's not effective or possible because with the guest there is the problem with if the target tenant requires MFA and it doesn't trust the MFA from the home tenant, then it won't be possible to log in there. Then it adds a new secret to some application it detected in that tenant so that the script is able to impersonate that application. And by impersonating the application, it was able to access pure puppy love tenant as the application with the roles, which is fully enough to compromise the tenant. And then the tenant was fully compromised and backdoored. Then it got the same to the bulletproof tech tenant as that application and was able to fully compromise it. Then it started to scan another tenant, pure puppy love. What are the relationships there? It found one guest relationship, but was unable to misuse it, so it's searching for another tenant, doing reconnaissance phase. It found 2 guest relationships, detected new tenant, happy accounting, and got access to the happy accounting as a regular user without any special permissions. And because this was set up as a test environment, it's quite small, so those are all the tenants. So 3 tenants were fully compromised, and 5 tenants were reachable through, or it got access to 5 tenants at total, but 3 tenants were fully compromised, so they are backdoored. Oh, thanks. But as I will share the script later on, don't test it in production environments because it's doing modification and changes. And that's why I didn't want to test it on our production environment because it would take me some time to clean it up later on. And the script, it makes some outputs. I have it like CSV, but actually it's a JSON. And it makes output of all the tenants which it detected. What are those names? And sometimes access tokens, if it was fully breached, then there are the relationships between the tenants, what kind of relationship it is, what kind of permissions it got, and access tokens if they were received. And then there is one JSON with the enterprise applications, which it got compromised and added these secrets. And if we would like to access some of those backdoored tenants, we can do it by logging as an application, that malicious application, logging to that tenant. So just if I will run the code, we will get connected to the Microsoft Graph. And so we can list, for example, users. So those are the users in that tenant. And if we will check what's our context, how we are connected to that graph, we will see that we are connected as that malicious application, that MS break glass. So if we will take the output from the application or from that POC script, we can reconstruct the hierarchy of those tenants, how they are dependent on each other, and how to get access from one tenant to another tenant. And I was doing those outputs because I thought that maybe to the future, someday, I could connect it with Bloodhound, because Bloodhound is an ideal tool to like have it shown, or how to show those relationships. Those edges are the relationships and nodes are the tenants which you can compromise. And maybe to the future, we can implement some privilege escalation module, because now if we move to a new tenant and we don't have enough permissions to backdoor it, it will just stop there. But the tenants are full of misconfigurations, and maybe we could try some privilege escalation, and we will be able to escalate our privileges and then to backdoor the tenant. Then the persistence can be done, for example, through FIDO keys or new users, and the script can be improved in speed and improve in how much noise it produces. Because right now it's quite noisy. It's scanning sign-in logs and so on, but it could be improved. So the POC, you can access it at our GitHub page. I was thinking if to publish it or not to publish it, but if I have gave you already my talk, you know how to write it, the script. And it took me like 1 Monday to write it, so it's not much. And I hope it will help to raise awareness about this issue and open discussion. And if you want to do something for your defense, so you need to take care about all of those relationships. So with the enterprise applications, it's necessary to do some review of those enterprise applications. As well, for that, we have some code, because in GUI, it's quite hard to do it because you are missing informations and you don't see the whole picture. Or there are some other scripts you can find on the internet which can help you to do some review. And as well, you should change the default configuration of the tenant, that you disable users to create or register new applications, and as well to consent those applications. Then you are having some kind of governance over your tenant. I don't know, I feel like everything began 5 years ago when Microsoft said empower the users, but right now, usually even the administrators, they don't know how the enterprise applications are working. So how the user should know that? It feels even the developers are having issues with those applications, and I feel like Wild West right now, because it's like 10 years ago when you were implementing some system, and the documentation said just give it domain administrator. Why? Because it's working. And now with those applications, just give it those permissions because it's working. But why? It's working. No one cares. So then it's about the Entra ID roles. You should know who is in your privileged roles. And you should know what users are those, and you should limit the number of the users. And as well, you should have separate accounts for regular work and the administration. And then there are the partner relationships, though GDEP. And with GDEP, you shouldn't have any partner or GDEP relationship if you don't have anyone who is helping you managing your tenant. And if someone is selling you just licenses, he don't need GDEP for that. So it should be empty. And to sum it up, with the widespread of Entra ID and the gap of knowledge of defenders of Entra ID, and they are becoming misconfigurations in Entra ID. And it will be the same with Active Directory. It's easy to do misconfiguration, and it's quite hard to clean the configuration, because it takes much more effort. You need to ask, who did the change? Is that application being used or it's not? And over the years, the misconfigurations, they will get accumulated, like in Active Directory. And if we will not take care about it, so I said it took me 1 Monday to make the POC. So just imagine that some APT group, which will spend few weeks of few engineers working on it, what could they make? And they have several initial compromised tenants already. And if they would run it, we could face some several global blackout of Entra ID environments. I don't know how much. I would guess it would be tens of % of global Entra ID tenants. It would be interesting. It would be quite severe. and it would be difficult to recover from it because we don't have procedures. No one was thinking what will happen if something like that happens. You know, they will be able to compromise those tenants, and what will they do? Encrypt the data, delete the users, delete the global administrator, so you are not able to get back. You know, of course, we will be able to recover from it, but it will be sudden, and it would be too big to be working on all the victims at the same time. You know, so we would need to prioritize. It's like our nightmare as an MSP company. If we would be breached, even we have like backups which will survive the ransomware, but all of our customers would be encrypted. We can recover from them from backup, but we don't have capacity to be working on all the customers at all at the same time. You know, so it would take weeks probably to recover from that incident. And that's why I hope we will take care more about our Entra ID environments, and we will avoid such a scenario. And that's all from my talk. Thank you very much for your attention.